When Galoob set out to make Star Trek figures based on the Next Generation in the 80s, they failed. But that didn't stop Playmate Toys from trying in the 90s. The line of Star Trek The Next Generation figures were a huge hit right from the start. You could tell that Playmates, from the designers to the marketing, really loved Star Trek. The line was such a huge hit that it would allow Playmates to make figures based on the classic series, the spin-off series, and the movies. The first hint that the Star Trek line might be in trouble was 1995, with the release of the figures based on the movie Star Trek Generation. The Next Generation was still a huge hit in reruns at the time, and just months before the film's release, it had ended the series on a high note. Fans were waiting for this movie at a fever pitch. They finally would get to see Captain Kirk team up with Captain Picard. And at the time, Playmates was crushing toy sales with a 5-inch action figure line. So when it came to do figures based on Star Trek Generations, they decided, for some unknown reason, I guess to save costs, the figures from the movie wouldn't be like the figures released. These would have more of a solid mold. They would move at the neck, shoulders, and top of the legs. Unlike the figures already at the stores that would be able to move at the knees and elbows. They were the same scale, but standing next to the already released figures, you could tell something was a little off, and it made them look like cheap knockoffs. Collectors wasn't really happy with the look of the Generation figures, but they still sold well. But collectors were already on edge, already getting upset, as Playmates was leaning more toward exclusives than ever before. Before the Generations movie, in 1994 they released an exclusive JCPenney figure, Data, in a red uniform. The card would say it was Data as seen in the episode Redemption. But as any Star Trek fan would tell you, Data never wore a red Starfleet uniform in that episode. He did wear it in the episode Chain of Command Part 2. The figure was also released in Canada. In the US it was limited to only 5,000 figures at JCPenney's. This started collectors driving to every JCPenney's they could to try to find the red uniform Data. Most collectors didn't even know JCPenney's had a toy section. The figure at the time on the secondary market would sell for about $200. Around this same time, Playmates released Thomas Riker, a figure based on the transporting clone of William Riker. This figure wasn't an exclusive figure and wasn't sold as a limited edition. It was limited to 10,000 figures. Why this figure has such a low production run is unsure, but it was just a figure of their already released Thomas Riker, now with a yellow uniform that was clearly just painted over the red one. So I can only guess that Playmates thought less fans would want to buy this figure. Collectors were starting to get fed up. Not only did they get a cheapened Star Trek line in the Generation figures, they now had to go hunting for exclusive figures. But worst of all, Playmates was starting to get in the habit of just popping off a head of one figure and putting it on another figure that had already been released. But the biggest problem came in 1996. On the Star Trek Collectors News Group, Playmates Rich Frey let fans know of something special coming in a few months in 1996. 3 new figures to add to their collection, if they could find them. Picard as seen in the episode Tapestry, Tasha Yar as seen in yesterday's Enterprise, and Lieutenant Barclay as he was seen in Star Trek Voyager. Each one, according to the plan, would be limited to only 1,701 figures each. 1701, as in the USS Enterprise 1701. By the time Rich announced this, the Picard figure was already heading to shipping, with Tasha planned to be released soon and then Barclay. Not too long after his post, Rich found himself flooded with emails, faxes, phone calls, and letters. Collectors were upset. How could they ever complete their set with a line so limited? Also, 2 of the figures were based on fan favorite episodes. What fans didn't know at the time was these were nothing really special. Again, Playmates were cutting corners. Our Yar figure had already been released in a different uniform. Lieutenant Barclay had already been released in a Next Generation uniform. And Picard? Well, it was just a Picard head put on the body of a Captain Kirk from the Generations line. Most collectors wouldn't be able to get them, but the ones that did, they were just getting retooled figures. But why would Playmates even do this? It seemed to have been the plan of the marketing department to get buzz back into the line, as they had seen sales starting to drop off. The marketing department thought if the fans were out looking for these exclusive figures, they would pick up a few figures here and there along the way. Project manager Jim Garville knew this was a bad plan from the start, and it would only upset collectors who were already on edge. As the Picard figure was hitting stores, and starting to resell in the secondary market for a few $100s, collectors grew more upset, writing letters to anyone that would listen. Playmates, Action Figure News, Hero Magazine, Fanfare, Action Figure Digest, website message boards, and the collectors' news groups. Fearing they had gone too far, Playmates decided to up the number on Yar and Barclay. The Barclay figure was quickly pushed to 3,000 figures. Playmates ordered that the limited 1701 sticker be taken off Tasha Yar and would plan to produce more. However, they soon found out she was already too far into production to up her production numbers. In the months followed, Playmates tried to fix the issue. They thought they would re-release the figures on a new card, but figured that might upset the collectors that had already found the figures, breaking a promise that they were limited. So a plan was made to re-release the figures in a box set. This was so collectors that wanted them loose could get them for their collection. The box set didn't do much to help concerns. By this time, the damage was done. In the early months of 1996, Playmates could see the sales starting to drop even more, but they did have a plan to win them back. Their plan was to release Star Trek figures that wasn't based on a TV show or a movie, but their own thing. Star Trek Starfleet Academy would see the release of Picard, Riker, Worf, and LaForge, but younger, when they were in Starfleet. Also along with the figure would be a CD-ROM game. Young collectors, and even the adult collectors, didn't want a part of it. Sales for these figures tanked. But all hope still wasn't lost, as fans were excited for the upcoming Star Trek movie. Playmates had let fans down with the cheaper version of the Star Trek Generation figure. Could they redeem themselves with figures based on Star Trek First Contact? The movie was set to be released during Christmas season, and have the Star Trek heroes fighting fan favorite, the Borg. And along with a whole new movie will be a line of whole new action figures. And this would hopefully get the collectors back. Or it should have, but for this line, Playmates decided they would scale up the figures from 5-inch to 6-inch. For collectors that have been collecting the Star Trek line for years, this made no sense. Putting them next to the figures they already had, you could tell it wasn't the same line. They didn't fit in. Star Trek First Contact was a huge hit, but the action figures for the movie, only thing they hit was the clearance bins. This was by far one of the dumbest marketing decisions ever made by a toy company. It would be like if Kenner released the 3.75 figures from Star Wars and Empire and then decided to make 5-inch Star Wars figures for Return of the Jedi. The cheapening of figures for the Generation movies, the Frankenstein style of making figures, the hard to find exclusives, and now changing the scales of the figures. This really killed the line, and Playmates never would recover. They did keep on going for a few more years, with a lot more exclusives and a lot more gimmicks. But the fun and hype of Star Trek Playmate figures were done. Collectors had had enough. By the time the next film, Insurrection, was released, Playmates only released them in a collector's doll size. As the 90s came to an end, so did Playmates Star Trek figures, in all sizes. The company would return to Star Trek in 2009, with badly made figures based on the new J.J. Abrams Star Trek film. The license of Star Trek would change hands to other companies, but it's been announced that Playmates and Star Trek were teaming up again for a new series of figures in 2022. We can only hope they have learned from their past mistakes and we'll get another great Star Trek line. Let me know what you think. As always, thumb up so you like my content, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk again soon.
Star Trek First Contact.
Junkman.
Thank you, sir, for that unsolicited testimony.